New York City had forgotten how to be kind to lonely souls. The February wind whipped through Manhattan like 1,000 tiny blades, slicing through coats and skin alike. Commuters hunched forward, breath fogging the air, hurrying toward heat and shelter. But Ethan Ward, celebrated architect, master of glass and steel, walked through it all untouched, as though the cold knew better than to try him. At 44, Ethan had everything. A design firm on Fifth Avenue, architectural landmarks from Tokyo to Paris, and a name etched into skylines around the world. But tonight, staring at his own reflection in the window of a tower he'd once dreamed of building, he saw not success, but a man quietly unraveling. The long nights, the billion-dollar contracts, the expensive wine consumed alone, they had lost their luster. Perhaps it was the engagement announcement set for tomorrow morning. His union with Vivian Hale, a sharp investor with impeccable taste and an even sharper instinct for power, had been dubbed a strategic partnership by everyone who mattered. But beneath the surface, Vivian had always wanted more than a merger. She wanted control. And when Ethan pulled away, she found another way in, through his enemies. He was marrying the perfect woman, for the perfect public image. And he was supposed to be proud of that. But all he felt was the urge to drown. He paused outside Ward Atelier, the 30-story building he'd built from nothing but sketches and insomnia, now gleaming like a monument to all he'd accomplished. He watched workers spill out of the glass lobby, faces lit blue by their screens. He used to be like them, hungry, focused, desperate. Now at the top, the view was crushingly empty. "Excuse me, mister." The voice cut through the noise like a bell, soft but impossibly clear. Ethan turned. A little girl stood beside him, brown skin aglow beneath the streetlights, curls bouncing around her round cheeks, and eyes. Those eyes. Amber, luminous, unnervingly deep. "You look really sad," she said, tilting her head with an honesty that was both childlike and ancient. "Are you lost?" He blinked, caught off guard, but she continued unfazed. "My mom says sad hearts need hot chocolate. She makes the best one in New York, with cinnamon and vanilla. Do you want to meet her? She helps people who feel like they forgot where home is." Ethan froze, not because of the question, but because of the stillness she brought with her, like a hush before snowfall, like memory. "What's your name?" he asked, voice rougher than he intended. "Mira," she said with a smile that felt like it could mend something broken. The wind howled around them, the city roaring on. But Ethan didn't feel its sting anymore. Not when standing beside a strange little girl with honey-colored eyes and a question that cracked him open from the inside. "Are you sad?" Ethan didn't quite understand why he was following an 8-year-old through the winter streets of New York. Maybe it was the eyes, too familiar, too much like someone he used to know, someone he had lost once and for all. His shoes echoed over the stone pavement, a steady beat against the backdrop of engines and icy wind winding through steel towers. Mira skipped ahead, glancing back with that sunlit smile that somehow warmed a corner of him he thought long frozen. They stopped at a red brick building in Soho. Old stairs creaked under their weight, the hallway bathed in soft amber light. Mira opened the door to the third-floor apartment, and as Ethan stepped in, the world fell still. The scent of oil paint, pine wood, and cinnamon hung in the air. Warm yellow light spilled from the ceiling lamp, casting soft shadows over a large, unfinished canvas. It was a space that breathed art, breath, and soul. And there, her back turned to them, stood Camille Reyes. She turned, and the moment their eyes met, time hiccuped. The world faded away. All that remained were two people carrying too much silence between them. Ethan didn't move. Camille hadn't changed. Her dark hair still curled over her shoulder, her eyes still deep enough to drown in. The same woman who once unraveled him with nothing but a glance. "Hi," she said. Her voice was quiet, raspy, unsure whether from shock or years without saying his name. "Mira found someone, Mommy," the girl beamed, throwing her arms around Camille's legs. "I told you he looked sad, just like the painting you made a long time ago." Camille froze. A flicker of something flashed through her eyes. Fear, recognition, guilt. Ethan knew that look too well. The look of someone with something to hide. You look well," Ethan said, words fumbling out like worn-out shoes. His head swirled with questions, none of them gentle enough to ask. "What are you doing here?" Camille asked, her voice cautious, her body stiff. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I just followed her." Silence. Not heavy, not tense, just thick with everything unspoken. Camille turned away, poured 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Ethan watched her. The way she pushed her hair behind her ear, the careful circle of her spoon, so familiar it hurt. "Her name's Mira," he said quietly. "You named her after that star you loved, didn't you?" She froze mid-stir. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," he replied. She turned, eyes glistening. And there it was, that look, the one that had always undone him. "Ethan, maybe you should go." Her voice was velvet, but her words cut sharp. "She's mine, isn't she?" he asked. His voice didn't shake, but everything inside him did. Camille looked at him, long, hard, then lowered her gaze. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. Her silence was the answer. Ethan didn't press further, but he knew what needed to be said had already begun to stir. That silence wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a truth that had stayed asleep for far too long. Camille gently closed Mira's bedroom door. The apartment was dim, awash in soft amber tones that brushed her features in gold. She stood there for a moment, hand pressed to her chest, as if holding her heart in place. Ethan sat by the window, his gaze lost in the blinking lights across Manhattan's skyline. In his hand was a cup of hot chocolate, long since gone cold. Camille moved to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and lingered, motionless between silence and memory. Ethan said nothing, but he knew. If he left now, they'd never say the things that needed saying. And he couldn't let that happen. Not again. "How long?" he asked, voice barely more than breath. Camille turned, fingers tightening around her glass. 9 years. 9, he repeated. "So, you knew when you left?" She nodded, her eyes avoiding his. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after I walked away." A beat skipped. Ethan gripped the cup harder. "And you said nothing?" "I was going to write," she murmured. "But then I saw that article. You and Vivian, starting the firm back up together. I figured you'd made your choice." "Camille!" Ethan stood, voice low, laced with disbelief. "You really thought I chose her over you? And you?" Camille looked at him directly, for the first time that night. "When I left, did you call? Did you look? One message? One email? Did you send anything?" Ethan faltered. He had searched in his own broken way. But when she vanished without a word, he'd believed she didn't want to be found. Pride had done the rest. "I didn't know you were pregnant," he said, almost pleading. "And I didn't know you never betrayed me," she replied. That's the tragedy, isn't it? 2 people in love, believing everyone but each other. Silence filled the space between them like fog. Horns honked outside. The wind crept through the window cracks. But here, inside, time had stopped. "I was going to propose," Ethan said suddenly. "I had the ring. I wrote the words. You disappeared the day before I was going to take you to that bridge you loved." Camille covered her mouth. A stifled gasp. "I lost both of you," he went on. "You and Mira. For all these years, I didn't even know what I'd lost." "I just wanted to protect her," Camille whispered. I didn't want Mira growing up with paparazzi at her school gates, with whispers in the press. I didn't want her to be a pawn in someone's game. Ethan stepped closer. You thought I'd let that happen to my own daughter? She didn't answer, but the silence no longer felt like rejection, just uncertainty. I deserve to know, Ethan said gently, but firmly. I deserve to love her. To be there. You don't get to make this decision alone. I didn't know what to do, Camille confessed. I've lived in fear for 8 years, afraid you'd hate me if you found out, afraid she'd hate me, afraid of seeing you again, still the man I loved, but untouchable. That last word cut him. Ethan reached out, not touching, just hovering his hand in the space between them. A gesture, small and trembling. I'm not angry, he said softly. I'm hurting, but more than anything, I'm grateful that I found you, that I found her. Camille looked at him, eyes glassy. She nodded, an apology, a thank you, and maybe a first step across the bridge between their hearts. Ethan felt as if he had heard his heart drop, not break, just fall, touching the bottom of the silence. Camille said nothing more, but the silence confirmed the most important thing. And then Mira appeared in the doorway. She stood there in her starry pajamas, clutching a floppy-eared stuffed bunny. Sleep still clung to her cheeks, but her eyes were wide, watchful, like she knew the air in the room had changed. "Mom?" Mira asked softly. Her voice wasn't groggy, it was curious, careful. "Are you okay?" Camille turned, offering a gentle smile. "I'm okay, sweetheart." "Couldn't sleep?" Mira shook her head and stepped forward. She looked at Ethan, longer than usual, before saying, "I saw you were sad on the street, but now you're sadder." Ethan's throat tightened, not from the words, but from the way she said them, with no accusation, no curiosity, just quiet knowing, like she could feel what he hadn't spoken out loud. "Mira," Camille said, her voice softer than wind. "This is Ethan. He's an old friend of Mommy's. We haven't seen each other in a very long time." The girl nodded slowly, her gaze still fixed on Ethan. Then, out of nowhere, she stepped closer, took his hand, gently but firmly, and placed it against her chest. "You're sad here, right?" Ethan froze. He looked down at her honey-colored eyes, so familiar, so full, and in them saw something he hadn't touched in years, the part of him he'd lost. He didn't know what to say. But Mira smiled and whispered, "It's okay. When you're here with me and Mommy, the sad gets smaller." In that moment, Ethan was no longer a stranger who had stumbled back into Camille's past. He was Mira's father, a part of the home she had been building alone for nearly a decade. And though no one said it out loud, they all knew. Tomorrow would no longer look like yesterday. Ethan came back on a Sunday morning. No warning, no plans, just a paper bag of croissants and tired eyes. Camille opened the door, ready to ask what he was doing there, but Mira beat her to it. "Daddy!" Camille froze when she heard the word leave her daughter's lips. Ethan paused too, but then he knelt, arms wide open. Mira ran into his hug as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. Camille tried to say something, then she exhaled slowly and stepped back, leaving the door just a little more open. After that, Ethan began coming more often, not by schedule, not by obligation, just present. He took Mira to school, picked her up in the afternoon, shared dinner at the little kitchen table. He taught her how to sketch paper models, how to shade with pencil, how to blend watercolor to capture the hue of a sunset. Mira loved it. And though she didn't say it, so did Camille. One evening, the oven broke. Ethan rolled up his sleeves, tied on an apron, and tried to cook dinner with whatever leftovers they had. Eggs, cheese, spinach. Camille laughed so hard watching him wrestle with an omelet that she had to lean against the wall. "I can't believe this," she gasped. "The man who designed a museum in Shanghai can't flip an egg." "Architecture is logic," Ethan replied. "Eggs are survival art." They both laughed. For the first time since that night, Camille's laughter felt real, unforced. Still, some nights she couldn't sleep. She'd stare out the window at the passing headlights, wondering if she was making a mistake. Letting him back in, was it forgiveness or weakness? Could softness today lead to a new break tomorrow? She had loved Ethan so much once, she'd lost herself. And she had lost him too, because she hadn't been brave enough to face the truth. Now she wasn't sure if forgiveness was the right choice, or simply what grief sounded like when it hadn't been healed. One quiet evening, as twilight settled in, Mira sat cross-legged on the floor with her crayons. Ethan was beside her. Camille read a book across the room. Out of nowhere, Mira looked up at her father, really looked, and said, "Your smile looks different." Ethan paused, pencil mid-air. "Different how?" "Different when me and Mommy are around," Mira whispered. "It's like a real smile, not a photo smile." Camille looked up. Ethan said nothing, but her words landed like thunder in his chest, tearing through years of masks and armor he hadn't realized he still wore. He didn't need to respond, because in that moment, Mira had spoken the one truth that mattered most. They didn't call it a family, but every moment whispered the word quietly in the background. And just when the heart began to believe that happiness might return, the past, true to its nature, found its way back in. The news broke on a Monday morning. Camille was making breakfast when her phone began buzzing nonstop. Messages, emails, missed calls, a storm all at once. Ethan walked into the kitchen and saw her pale face. She handed him the phone. On the screen, a headline screamed, "Millionaire Architect's Secret Past, Old Flame, Love Child, and the Gold Digger Plot." Beneath it was a photo of Camille holding Mira's hand outside her gallery with a cruel caption. "Insider sources claim Camille Reyes is back to cash in, armed with a child and a plan." Ethan clenched his jaw. Victor Lang. He didn't need to read past the first line to know exactly who was behind it. Victor, the former partner he'd forced out of Ward Atelier for embezzlement, was back. And this time, he wanted more than revenge. Within hours, Camille received a court summons, a motion for temporary custody of Mira, filed by attorneys representing Victor Lang and Vivian Hale. In it, Camille was painted as an unstable single mother with questionable income, manipulating family ties for personal gain. Camille could barely stand. Ethan took her home. She said nothing the entire drive. Her face drained, her eyes hollow. The woman who had raised a child alone for 8 years now looked like she was crumbling from within. Camille sat frozen on the sofa, still clutching the crumpled court summons. Her eyes were dry now. Tears had stopped the moment she read the first line. Temporary custody petition. Minor. Mira Reyes. The room felt larger than usual, or maybe it was just her, shrinking. For the first time in years, Camille didn't feel like a strong mother. She felt like a woman on the verge of losing the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Her heart raced, but her mind was eerily silent. No screaming thoughts, no clear plans. Just a cold, echoing void, deep and familiar, like the one she'd fallen into 9 years ago. She had believed she wouldn't have to run again, that this return was a beginning, but with a single piece of paper, the past had flooded back in, washing away the ground beneath her. Camille thought of Mira, those honey eyes, that bubbling laugh, the innocent question, "Is Daddy staying with us?" She didn't know how to answer anymore. She was a mother, but was she good enough? A painter with unstable income, no legal safety net, A woman who had once vanished without a word, and now a name dragged through headlines as the woman who trapped a millionaire. Camille gripped the paper tighter, curled in on herself, arms wrapped around her knees like they were the only thing holding her together. Deep down, she knew Mira was the only reason she could keep going. But if the world took her daughter away, what would she have left? That evening, Ethan returned to the apartment. He stepped inside quietly and found Camille packing Mira's things. The suitcase was open on the bed, stuffed toys, crayons, tiny dresses, folded quickly and desperately. "Don't do this," Ethan said, his voice calm. Camille didn't turn. "I can't let them take her. And you think running is the only way?" He moved closer, eyes steady on her. "You're going to repeat what happened 9 years ago?" Camille's hands trembled. "Back then, I left because I was afraid of losing you. This time, I'm leaving because I can't lose her." "You'll lose both of us if you go," Ethan said, "and I won't let that happen." The next morning, Ethan went to see Victor at the firm. No appointment, no lawyers, just him, and a stare cold enough to crack steel. Victor was in the boardroom, flipping pages, pretending to work. When he looked up and saw Ethan, he smirked. "Ethan, I'm just doing what's best. You don't want this kind of scandal, right?" "You're targeting an 8-year-old child, Victor," Ethan said, voice sharp. "She's my daughter." "Then get a paternity test. Let the court decide," Victor shrugged. "But Camille, she's a liability. I'm doing you a favor by removing her before she drags your reputation into the gutter." Ethan didn't flinch. He pulled out a small recorder, Victor's phone call with Vivian, laying out the media smear strategy in detail. He placed it on the table. "This is enough for a lawsuit, defamation, privacy violation, media manipulation," Ethan said coolly. "But I haven't sent it, yet. I wanted to tell you this face to face, touch Camille or my daughter again, and there won't be a next move for you." Victor's smirk faded. Ethan stood, turned, and walked away without a word more. The boardroom door closed behind Ethan, and his footsteps slowly faded down the hall. Victor remained seated, eyes locked on the empty space in front of him. The audio recorder still lay on the table, small, but heavy enough to shatter every plan he had so carefully constructed. Victor let out a short, bitter laugh. There was no smugness left in it, only acid and regret. He hadn't expected Ethan to go this far, not the Ethan he once knew. That Ethan was diplomatic, always seeking compromise, avoiding confrontation. But the man who had just walked out of that room was different, stronger, sharper. A man who would protect what mattered most to him. Something Victor never truly had. His fists clenched, knuckles paling under the pressure. It wasn't the loss that stung. It was being seen, exposed, laid bare as petty, fragile, manipulative. He'd believed he could control everything, media, influence, people. But there was one thing he could never control: love. Ethan had it. Camille had it. Even the little girl, Mira, had it. And all he had was the void. Alone in the silence of the boardroom, Victor finally understood. He'd never really been fighting for justice. He'd only been trying to salvage the last flicker of relevance from a life that had long since begun to crack. Back in Soho, Camille sat frozen in the apartment. Mira was napping, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling around her. Camille clutched Mira's old stuffed bear, hands shaking. She had been strong for so long, but now she wasn't sure how much was left. The door opened. Ethan entered, quiet, steady. He sat beside her, took her hand, held it. "You don't have to fight this alone," he said. Camille turned to look at him. Fear still lingered in her eyes, but there too was something new. A spark, fragile, but real. That morning, the sky over New York was as gray and heavy as Camille's chest. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself, one hand gripping her handbag like a final layer of defense. Inside were court documents and a few of Mira's drawings. Simple, colorful sketches, full of innocence and heart. Looking at them, Camille reminded herself, this was why she had to fight. Ethan was already waiting outside the courthouse. He didn't say anything sentimental, no long words of comfort, just a nod, a look that said clearly, I'm here, don't be afraid. Camille didn't speak either. She simply nodded back. Something inside her, tight and shaking, softened just a little. The courtroom wasn't large, just enough for those directly involved. But the atmosphere was stifling, pressing in from all sides. Across from them, Victor Lang sat in a tailored suit, a smirk playing on his lips like this entire trial was a power game he had orchestrated long ago. Beside him was Vivian Hale, Ethan's former lover, cold eyes fixed on Camille with thinly veiled contempt. Camille's heart was pounding in her ears, her hands icy cold. For a moment she thought she might falter, but then Ethan reached over and gently touched her hand. That small squeeze, firm and steady, was like an anchor in the middle of a rising storm. She held on tightly. For the first time in a long time, she truly believed she wasn't doing this alone. The hearing began. From the very first moments, Victor launched his attack. Through his attorney, he painted Camille as an unfit single mother. Unstable income, no permanent residence, a home environment unfit for a child's development. His lawyer's final words were delivered with practiced concern. My client wants only what's best for Mira, and that cannot be achieved under the current circumstances. Camille wanted to shout, to defend herself, but Ethan stood first. Your Honor, he said, his voice calm, his eyes steady. I'm not just Mira's biological father. I've seen Camille Reyes raise a child with more courage and love than most people can begin to understand. Then he laid out the truth, not with emotion, but with facts, precise, undeniable. Audio recordings of Victor and Vivian conspiring to launch a media attack. IP logs showing Camille's email had been accessed without her knowledge, from within Victor's former firm. Security footage of a man tailing Camille and Mira through the city, identified as a private investigator hired by Victor. The courtroom went still. The judge's expression darkened. Victor's lawyer looked visibly shaken, fumbling through papers without response. Ethan didn't raise his voice, didn't dramatize. He simply presented the truth and let it speak. Camille's attorney followed, emphasizing that his client had not only been slandered, but actively threatened, legally and personally. My client has done everything a mother should do. She isn't asking for special treatment. She's asking the court to protect what matters most, her right to be a mother. Camille looked up at the judge. Her eyes no longer trembled. She knew this wasn't just a legal battle. This was where she reclaimed her name, her dignity, and her child. An hour later, the ruling came. All accusations were dismissed. Camille retained full custody of Mira. Ethan was formally recognized as the child's father, with shared rights to care and visitation as agreed between both parties. Most importantly, Victor Lang was officially referred for a criminal investigation for violating privacy laws, falsifying information, and manipulating the media. In the stillness that followed the final gavel strike, Camille finally exhaled. It wasn't relief, it was release. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe again. Ethan looked at her, didn't speak, just gently squeezed her hand. This time, it wasn't reassurance, it was a promise. Camille turned toward him and smiled, just a little. But it was the first smile in years that looked like hope. She had stayed. She had faced it. And now, she could finally move forward, no longer afraid, no longer running. Justice was served. But in that courtroom, what they truly reclaimed was something more enduring than a verdict, They reclaimed trust. And when the gavel fell, it didn't just end a trial. It began a quieter, braver chapter, the healing of a family that had once been lost. New York slowly slipped back into its rhythm, and so did they. 3 people who had once broken apart, now quietly learning how to live again, step by step. There were no more court summons, no more headlines, no more stares. Just a small apartment in Soho where Mira's laughter echoed each morning. The smell of warm coffee filled the kitchen, and the soft hum of paintbrushes dipped into color returned. Camille began working again, hosting small workshops, selling a few paintings, receiving scattered commissions from strangers who somehow understood what she painted. Ethan hadn't returned to his old office. He set up a workspace at home, transforming a corner of the living room into a studio of sorts: sketch pads, foam models, unrolled blueprints. But he wasn't in a hurry anymore. He no longer chased million-dollar contracts or towering glass buildings. These days, joy came from picking Mira up from school, folding paper planes, or stealing bites of Camille's slightly burnt pancakes. At night, once Mira had fallen asleep, Camille would sit quietly in her studio, not to work, but to breathe, to listen, to simply feel herself being okay. Life might not be perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. One late autumn afternoon, as Camille was reorganizing her easels, she noticed Ethan standing at the door of her studio, hands behind his back. He wasn't wearing a blazer, wasn't holding a laptop, just Ethan, simple and steady, with eyes warm like sunlight through glass. "Something wrong?" Camille asked, tilting her head slightly. Ethan said nothing. He stepped forward and placed a small wooden box in front of her. It was old, a bit scratched along the edges. Camille opened it, and inside was a thin silver ring with a deep blue sapphire. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, but something about it felt true. "It belonged to my grandmother," Ethan said softly. "My grandfather gave it to her in 1946. They lived through war, poverty, years no one thought love could survive. But she told me that ring was her reminder. If you can still love, you can still stay." Camille's hand trembled gently near the box. "I'm not proposing because I think it'll fix everything," Ethan continued. "I'm proposing because I want to begin again, from the start, not from where we left off, but from where we are now, here, together." She didn't answer right away. She looked down at the ring, as if it held the entire path she had walked to get here. Then she looked back up, tears falling before she could stop them. "I used to run from everything," she whispered, voice trembling like wet paint on canvas, "because I thought love was something I didn't deserve. But this time, I know better. This time, I choose to believe I'm enough, and I choose to stay." She picked up the ring, her fingers trembling. For a moment, she held it between them, like a weight she wasn't sure she could carry. Then, slowly, she placed it into his hand. Her voice quivered, but her eyes were sure. "This time, I choose to stay." Ethan didn't say anything. He just held her, tight, like they had finally walked out of a storm and found shelter beneath an open sky. Outside, the wind began to shift. The first yellow leaves of the season danced past the half-open studio window. And in one rare, quiet moment in the city that never sleeps, a little home in Soho finally began again, with love and with the courage to never walk away again. The late sun spilled across the wooden floor like honey. The room was quiet, save for the soft sound of a brush gliding across canvas. Camille was painting, not rushed, not forced. Each stroke felt like breath, like life. She had once feared blank canvases, as if they reminded her of all that remained unfinished. But today, she wasn't afraid. On the canvas, a scene was slowly coming together. 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child, holding hands, walking beneath a golden sunset. Their faces weren't detailed, but the soft light and long shadows behind them made it feel real, familiar. It wasn't just an image, it was a memory being reborn. She tilted her head and smiled. She had never painted herself before. But this time, she was painting them. She was painting us. Behind her, the door creaked open. Small footsteps ran in, fast and loud, before stopping suddenly. Mira burst into the room, wrapping her arms around Camille from behind, shouting, "Mom! Are you done yet? I'm starving!" Camille laughed and set her brush down. Ethan followed, holding 2 warm croissants in his hands. He looked at the painting, and in his eyes was something quiet, something bright, as if he was seeing a future he once thought had slipped away. "Can I name this one?" Ethan asked, sitting beside her. Camille nodded and turned to face him. He stared at the 3 silhouettes in the golden light, then whispered, soft, almost reverent, "Where forgiveness lives." Camille paused, then nodded. Yes, not a happy family or new beginnings, but this was it. A place where people stay, even after they've been broken. A place where you don't erase the past, but learn to walk forward with it. Mira settled between them, munching her croissant while doodling on a scrap of paper. Her head tilted as she studied the painting. "That's us, right?" she asked softly. "Daddy, draw something," she added. "Mom did. I did. You haven't drawn anything." Ethan chuckled, picked up a pencil, and sketched beside Mira. A tiny house, chimney smoking gently into the evening sky. A simple, little home, drawn right beneath a setting sun. Camille looked at the sketch, then reached out and placed her hand over his. Outside, the last light of day faded. The city beyond began to glow. But inside that small room, no one was in a rush. No one needed to be anywhere else. There were no more escapes, no more what-ifs, only the present, quiet, honest, and whole. Some loves never disappear. They're only waiting for us to be brave enough to come back.